This is the official kickoff of Breeders Cup season here at the In the Money Media YouTube channel and on the In the Money Players Podcast. PTF back with you in the Brooklyn bunker once again. We're going to be having so much stuff. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let us know in the comments in this video what you thought of the action last weekend. We want to communicate with you regularly there. Make sure you're also subscribing to the In the Money Players Podcast wherever you get your pods, because there's going to be plenty of exclusive stuff over there. And then the other thing you can do is just sign up for our free email, inthemoneypodcast.com/email. You are back with the award-winning In the Money Players Podcast and YouTube channel, and I am very happy to be joined today by a man who gave us plenty of winners in the races we talked about last weekend. I think he was smarter than me and was able to make some money overall, too. He's Nick Tammaro. Nick, how are things?
Going great, Pete. High season for the Breeders' Cup for sure. So got the majority of the preps behind us, and on we go.
Yeah, really, what's left, right? I mean,
nothing.
In this country, nothing. Champions Day. We're not touching any European stuff in this show other than Invaders, who we might touch on. But I do think I want to do some separate free stuff on the Euros this year. Maybe we'll pull in Michael Adolphson to review some of the key preps there. Of course, if you want all the stuff, our Plus service is the place to go. But I've given too many plugs already. We'll save that one for the end of the show or a different video. Let's dive right into Keeneland on Friday. Races we talked about last weekend. Kicking off the stakes action with the Phoenix, where Nakatomi returned from a short layoff to win by a neck as the favorite for Erad, Ortiz, and Wesley Ward. The figure, a 93 buyer, the same as he ran in this race last year before his sixth in the sprint. He had a little bit of a trip excuse there, I suppose, but wasn't terribly competitive. Any reason to think Nakatomi can do better in the sprint this time around, Nick? And what did you think of the Phoenix in general?
Yeah, I liked him last year in the Breeders' Cup and was pretty underwhelmed by his performance all in all. I think my biggest issue with him is that, he's run these good races just so periodically and so infrequently, and the lack of consistency is a real concern. He's always been a little bit better at Keeneland probably, which is true of the majority of Wesley Ward's barn. So I don't really see him being much of a threat. The race ended up coming up kind of a dud with just the 93 fig, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that world record was basically a no-show, and he was one of the expected fast horses in there that you would think would run a little bit better, and he was a very non-threatening fifth. Skelly runs races at Oakland that are just simply not duplicated anywhere else, and so it ended up being kind of a battle between Nakatomi and Durante that Nakatomi was just a little bit better.
Yeah, the old pop and stop from Skelly, as we're used to. I guess you could take it as a big form boost for Bookham Dano, but it still sounds like he is not. I'm waiting for the day when they walk this back, but it sure sounds like he's not going to go to the sprint. What are you hearing? Anything different?
Last I heard, that Derek Ryan, who never really sounded all that thrilled about going, was annoyed about the Paco suspension, and so he just didn't want to go. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that the horse is not running. That would probably be favored, but pointing to the 26th edition.
Yeah, very odd stuff, but good news for our international fans who got down on Ben Tornado at our say-so, who looks shorter by the minute. Let's move on to the Jessamine, won by Imagination, the lady, a winner that required a little bit of imagination, being 10-1. Definitely one of the first signs on the weekend that Brendan Walsh was going to be starting this fall meet at Keeneland scalding hot, but not his biggest upset winner. We'll get to that. Good trip for this one. One clear under Dettori. Figure just 73. It's going to go to the Breeders' Cup, an undefeated runner with some profile. Does she have a chance in a race like that?
I doubt it. I feel like we're at such a disadvantage with our horses versus theirs being the European Invaders. This is a horse that did run better. Boy, she got a really good ride from Frankie too, to get over from the 11, save some ground, get into a good position, outlast everybody late. She feels like a filly with a lot of upside. You just wonder if the Breeders' Cup might be a little bit more than she can handle at this stage of her career. But it was a strong effort and one that, certainly I think positions her well to be a solid 3-year-old filly next year.
Yeah, and the figures say chill, but the eye test, as you point out, and the form say maybe. This is a race always going to be a bit in flux until we know who all is going to show up. The other biggest story of this race was the one that didn't run very well. That was Heavy Chalk, Time to Dream for Todd Pletcher and Erad Ortiz. You put forth the hypothesis about the Pletcher runners who were all on that heater at the end of Saratoga, maybe taking that form with a grain of salt when they came back. In the case of the first two to run back, especially, I'd say that hypothesis was pretty well borne out. What do you think will happen next for Time to Dream?
Yeah, there was a lot of disagreement on social media about this, and a lot of bad trip analysis, I think, for lack of a better way to put it, that I saw people use words like nightmare, horrendous, as far as her trip goes. And boy, if horses that I bet from the 11 post in a 2-turn turf race at Keeneland get her trip, I don't think I'll be all that upset for the rest of my life. So she got over to the fence. Yeah, there was a brief period of time in upper stretch where Irad would have liked to get a cleaner split. But, when you work your way out from the fence, you're going to run into a little traffic more often than not. I thought she had a pretty clean run, all things considered, and didn't really pick up the way she had at Saratoga. The other thing to remember is this was a mile and a 16th, and she's going to go a mile in the Breeders' Cup, which I'm sure she'll go because Mike Rapoli's going to want as much action as possible. But I would say she's a fringe player at best in a race like that.
All right, we'll see where the market ends up in that one. Interesting. There will be some armchair trip handicappers wanting to make excuses, but yeah, it didn't look like the kind of race I'm going to want to back you for the Juvenile Fillies turf out of. I almost said it wrong, actually. I do appreciate multiple people from 10 years ago when I can't even remember what horrible way I pronounced Alcibiades, and I almost did something weird there, but it wasn't correct. But I really do appreciate that. They will never let me forget. It shows that people care. Alcibiades is what I think I said. That's bad. I'll admit it. But
my late father, God rest his soul, always called it the Alcibiades.
That's better though, because it seems intentionally comical as opposed to my butchering. So Tommy Joe gets the win here, but not as expected. Gets it in the steward's room after Percy's Bar crossed the wire first, well clear. Let's start with this one. What did you think of the DQ?
It's one of those where they had to make the DQ. It's just very unfortunate because I don't know about you, Pete, but I'm of the opinion that if Tommy Joe was getting by her, it was going to take the length of the stretch to do it, if that. And if you look at around what normally would be the quarter pole, but in these races, the 3/16 pole, Luan Machado is riding Percy's Bar very high in the saddle, whereas Johnny V is really getting after Tommy Joe. Now, I don't want to use that as rationale for where these horses would have finished because Todd Pletcher horses generally can take a lot more of that grindy type of style and time to hit their best stride. But it did not appear to me like Tommy Joe was going to go by Percy's Bar. And the incident was unfortunate because I don't really think Percy's Bar needed that to win. And yet Luan, who I'm really not a particularly big fan of, stuck this horse left-handed to try and get out and intimidate a little bit, and it really backfired. So it was a questionable move on his part, one for which he ultimately paid a pretty significant price. It throws the 2-year-old filly race into a bigger type of issue, I would say, because Tommy Joe was supposed to be the reliable, and she didn't really stretch out with all that much alacrity. And now you're forced to wonder, is she really going to be deserving of potential favoritism? On paper, probably not. So I'd begin to be a little concerned. This was supposed to be a better effort. All in all, at the end of the day, it's a 9-point Beyer speed figure drop-off from a horse in a category where you really want to see them moving forward.
Must have been an interesting moment in the steward's room for this one, where with having to take down the director of racing's horse. That can't have been fun. But doesn't sound like you have any kind of problem with the decision. You think like it might have been warranted based on the recklessness there.
Yeah, it was a decision that had to be made, and it just goes to show you the people who opine about stewards' decisions having to do with pick sixes, or I saw somebody say to me, well, the CAWs were heavy on Percy's Bar, should a big late hit. They want to keep them afloat. I was like, okay, sure.
That's the kind of conspiracy theory that comes with it.
I'd love to hear a dissertation from the 3 stewards at Keeneland about CAWs.
Pretty funny. Oh my goodness. Yes, you make a good point about the figure decline. Another one sort of to your hypothesis being borne out despite the win. Talked about favoritism for this race. This ain't pretty, right? We've got, what was the figure here? An 80. And my original thing looking at it was like, will this even be a key prep for the Juvenile Fillies? But of course it will, because you look, and we'll get to some of these other races, but you look at what the others are running. The sharpest book actually has 3-1 Tommy Joe right now. I don't think I could swallow that.
No.
They have Explorer, who will get to 7-2. Battle of Rouge, the one that won at Del Mar, and I guess will be training up 11-2. Iron Orchard, who we'll talk about, 6. Percy's Bar 11-2, and then Longer the rest. It's a bit hungry. This is a slow group out there. I wonder if it could lead to something crazy happening in the juvenile fillies. That would be where I'm starting. Maybe we have a bold predictions video out. I think if I could make it again today, I'd say my bold prediction would be the juvenile fillies winner is going to pay $40.
Yeah, I would say so. I think if you were going to do a poll of what dirt race is likeliest to yield a $30+ winner, it feels like the juvenile fillies would have to get a lot of votes.
Let's talk about Saturday. We'll start with the Woodford. Cadem did show that he's not just an Ascot horse for course with that impressive burst of late speed under that man again, DeTore. 96 figures, so probably not going to be Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint relevant, you wouldn't think. The story for me here, just the Frankie revival that I'm all about. He did look a little lost at times earlier this year, but he's just now clearly back on form at a good time. It's going to be interesting to see what his book of rides looks like at the Breeders' Cup. Anything on the Woodford?
Yeah, no, it was a phenomenal ride. I mean, to win with that horse from where he was after the break, I think just goes to show you what vintage Frankie was all about, which was cool in the saddle, ready to just let what happened be what happened rather than dictate what he was going to do. And this was an excellent ride. It was a race that came apart a little bit late. I bet Arrest Me Red. I felt a little unlucky. And, I don't really want to beat up on Luan Machado too much because he was trying to save ground and was drawn inside anyway. I wish he had a little bit better exit strategy for mid-stretch. Not sure he would have beaten Cadem, but I would have taken the 8-1 exacta.
I was going to ask you if you thought Arrest Me Red could be a bet back at Breeders' Cup time, or is it just too slow of a race?
Yeah, 5's probably too quick for him. They're probably going to go too fast in front of him for him to get going. If it was, I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years, the Breeders' Cup Sprint being 5.5 and 6.
Yeah,
just don't count me among those that really likes this 5 furlong little, ping pong action around there at Del Mar. So maybe a horse. It seems like this horse, his career is endless. So maybe he stays in training for 26.
Thoroughbred Club of America was excited for Robbie Medina, who's been on our airwaves, to get another upset graded stakes win with Praying. Figure just a 90. Vava, we should talk about. Obviously disappointing. Did you see an excuse from her, or is this just a case of the old bay mare just ain't what she used to be?
All due respect to Praying, and Robbie Medina's done a good job with her. This was a really weak race. Praying's turned into a nice horse. I don't think there's any Breeders' Cup horses in here. And quite honestly, Pete, I have no idea what the hell's happened to Vava. I mean, she is a shell of her former self. And really, aside from that Chicago, where the form we talked about beforehand, the form did not hold up. My Main Squeeze was the only horse who came out of there and ran even respectably, and she did so against New York breds. I don't know. This set of races from Vava is really head-scratching. And I know she didn't lose by a lot in here, but Christ, I mean, she got a 90 fig. Like, Vava's 10 points better than that on her best day. So I don't know what's going on, but it hasn't been pretty.
Let's talk about the First Lady, where we had a result that knocked me out of everything with Eddie Keneally and Ben Curtis getting the win. Another race where it doesn't feel like there's too likely to be a Breeders' Cup implications in this one, but I was curious if you thought I missed anything and it was underrating the winner simply in front.
No, she had a great trip, got a very good ride from Ben Curtis. Excellent rider who's having a big year. And I thought he had her in the right spot the whole way around there. I've got to do a little more work on the turf races throughout the weekend in terms of replay watching and some trip analysis, because there were times where it felt to me like you wanted to maybe be a path and a half off the inside. And it is very, very firm right now. Am I making an excuse for Choisia? No. Choisia had an unbelievable trip, got a dream run through on the inside, and just simply came up empty late. She was one of the two disappointments in the race, not nearly as big as the biggest disappointment, which was Dynamic Pricing, right, who just did no running whatsoever, and otherwise had been a pretty consistent filly, all things considered. Maybe she wants a little more cut in the ground. She's run fine on firm turf, though, so I don't really know where that effort came from. I know I was sort of obnoxiously dismissive of Nandadea on the Inner Circle show Saturday morning. I have no idea. Nandadea being a bigger price in this race than simply in front blows my mind. So, but it was the case, and obviously the word was out on Nandadea. She didn't run a step. To take nothing away from the winner, but yeah, there's no Breeders' Cup aspirants in here.
Let's talk about a race with major Breeders' Cup implications. Ted Noffey, 97 speed figure, backing up that 98. Looked great to me. Installed now at the Sharpest Book. Does that say 5-4? Sounds like a horse that could be odds on Breeders' Cup weekend.
Wow.
If our market is going to align at all with this one, but I mean, heck, on the figures, it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's so hard to know what to make of Brandt. I guess is going to be a logical second choice, or Napoleon Solo, who we'll get to. So the biggest surprise to me in this race, how in the world, and you're the right person to ask this question to, how in the world was Blackout Time so close to Ted in the betting? 3-2 versus evens. I mean, I know Blackout Time was a wise guy horse and made sense. I think in my picks, I was 90% Ted, 10% Blackout Time. I could not believe the way the horse was bet. I mean, bet as if, not defeat was out of the question because he wasn't the favorite, but bet as if a poor run was out of the question. And the horse ran well and now has a really interesting figure pattern too, with the 78 first out to the 83 to the 93. So how good is Ted Noffey? How did Blackout Time get bet like that? And can Blackout Time reverse form next time? Those are your questions.
Yeah, I mean, Ted Noffey's really good, right? Best 2-year-old, probably headed into the Breeders' Cup. Hasn't been that long. Cave Rock probably comes to mind. His career didn't go on much after that, but he was pretty highly regarded going into the Breeders' Cup in 22. We've had a few along the way prior to that. Game winner in 18 was pretty highly regarded as well. But Ted Noffey's now run really fast twice, right, and that's tough to overlook. So I'm expecting him to be a short price favorite. I don't know when they get this field together, Pete, when you start to look at the likes of Brandt and Blackout Time and Ted Noffey and Napoleon Solo, a couple of others that I'm probably being too dismissive of. I don't really know if he'll end up being that short, 1.25 to 1. That seems low, but we'll talk about this race. I'm sure at least we'll touch on it. Bob Baffert had 4 horses in the American Pharoah and didn't win.
Right.
So, if Baffert's best 2-year-old at this point is Brandt, then yeah, Ted Noffey's going to be a big favorite. Yeah. Right, because even though Brandt won the Del Mar Futurity, he didn't do so in any kind of impressive form. And Baffert's horses in the juvenile generally have run better when they've run more frequently.
We'll keep it going at Keeneland. We'll probably have to get into speed mode even more, given how much time we want to do this in. We've got to talk about this this turf mile. The New York bred gets it done. Rhetorical. Matt Bernier, kudos to him, who talked about this horse as one of his bets of the weekend when we had him on previewing the meet. Irad again for Will Walden. Will Walden, by the way, going to be on the show this week talking about that amazing stable recovery program that he's involved in. I got Matt's case on the horse and wrote nice things about him, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking could be an interesting player at some point in the future in stakes races. Well, apparently the future is now. This was really cool to see. I felt I felt good for our friend Naja Thompson, New York Thoroughbred Breeders, who's been a supporter of ours for a long time. Good weekend for New York Breds.
It was, and going back to the Kentucky Derby Day, the race that day was won by Spirit of St. Louis, also a New York bred.
Yes.
So the fact the New York breds have done as well as they have this year in Kentucky on grade 1s on the turf, it's pretty amazing. So this was it was a really good effort from Rhetorical, who's always hinted at being a really nice horse. And I remember Sean Borman and I liked some wild long shot in the race where Rhetorical broke his maiden. And little did I think a little over 14 months ago or so that was a future grade 1 winner that we saw in that New York bred maiden special weight race. But here he is. And Will's obviously got it figured out pretty quickly, right? 25% on the year, huge ROI. His horses seem to run very consistently. So hats off to him and congratulations to the connections. Probably not much of a Breeders' Cup Mile threat when push comes to shove, but a horse who certainly earned his way there.
Diego Velasquez, Frankie said he just didn't handle the track. The bend surprised him. Guess ran okay on class, but temperamental sort. I assume they're going to regroup. And Wallowitz, I think, is out of consideration. He ran fine until he clearly didn't stay. And time to, again, regroup with him as well. Thorpedo Anna on Sunday. You and I were with. That was probably the sign to be against.
Told you.
You did say that. You did say you were the mush. We talked about Songbird. I mean, what is this? This to me just throws the distaff into disarray is the word I'll use.
Yeah, she's finished. I doubt we'd see her back. Horses that run like that don't come back a month later and run respectably. So I can't imagine he'd want to send her out there again to potentially lose. This was just a very listless effort. It really wasn't even, at least at Churchill, she had an excuse. Kenny made a ridiculous deal of the first turn that Brian Hernandez totally downplayed, but at least there was an excuse. I mean, yesterday she was sitting in a good spot. Yeah, Jose ranged Nitrogen up a little bit outside of her, but once Flavian moved his hands around the turn, there was just nothing there. So, and I don't say she's finished in any kind of way to be disrespectful. I think the career that Thorpedo Anna's had is beyond admirable. She's a Hall of Fame horse.
Yeah.
She's obviously an immense talent, but Pete, they don't stay good forever, right? And there are times where eventually the bloom comes off the rose, and it looks like that happened for her, because that was a race the way it played out. On it, even with her B to B plus game, she wins that race.
Yeah. Jin gets the win in a tight photo with Nitrogen. Nitrogen currently near the top of the market for the distaff, 4-1 at the sharpest book. Cavalieri at 7-2. Darth Vader 8. Thorpedo,
what is Seismic Beauty's price?
7 at the sharp book.
That might be the best bet you could make right now.
That's interesting. And then Clicquot 12. Immersive 14, and longer the rest of the sharpest book. That's interesting. We'll talk about that race more on another show, but I do, before we move on from this race, we have to comment on the winner, and we have to talk about if we think Nitrogen is a serious contender for the Breeders' Cup Distaff.
Nitrogen's a serious contender for the most versatile horse in the country.
Yes.
That's what she's a serious contender for to me. I mean, she continues to deliver, and this was her 8th start of 2025. Mark Cassidy, a guy who never shies away from the entry box. Love him for that. And she's continued to perform at a high level. I've been waiting for her to run a poor race. She just hasn't. She continues to deliver. And Mark's got he doesn't have a decision to make. If she's running in the Breeders' Cup, she's running in the distaff. Yeah. So it's just a much more valuable race. And she can't go a mile and 3/8 anyway. And she's earned her way there. Does she need to run a little bit better? She does. But I'm talking up Seismic Beauty. What if she sets a fast pace? She checks out at the quarter pole. Cavalieri can't withstand the pace itself as well. You pretty much throw a blanket over everybody else.
Yeah,
right. You take the winners of the Beldame, Spinster, Cotillion, all those horses. They're just a varying degree of the same horse. Just a mid-90s.
Yeah, Beyer was a 95 for Jin and Nitrogen there. We'll go to New York. We'll talk very quickly about the Frizette, where we saw more New York bred success with Iron Orchard, Rosario, and Gargan teaming up for a well-timed run from Joel. Credit to us on the Inner Circle show. Everybody was making their case for Riley Tolley as the probable value, second at 35-1. Not too bad. But are there any Breeders' Cup implications here? Iron Orchard gets a 79. Previous best was an 81. But we've said, based on what the other horses did in Kentucky, I mean, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, the thing that you might want to upgrade Iron Orchard for, and again, I've got to look closer at some of the replays, is it felt like you wanted to be towards the inside, and she really never was. So that fig could be, might belie the strength of her performance a little bit.
Interesting.
I think the interesting thing about her is that she rated comfortably.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way towards probably the possibility, at least, that she can be effective going longer. I love Joel on a horse like this too, because he'll really get every ounce of distance out of them. Yes. So I wouldn't write her off. Obviously I don't love that Riley Tolley finished second, because she was a huge long shot, and she did kind of take a little bit more advantage of being towards the inside. But it was a nice solid effort from Iron Orchard, another New York bred.
Yeah, and it's not like it's some fluke. The previous fig was an 81 on Beyer, 79. Right. This horse, I mean, if there's nobody coming in with big numbers, is going to be right there. Could be, maybe I'm wrong about my $30, $40 horse in the juvenile fillies. Let's talk about the Champagne. We can talk about Rosario again. Napoleon Solo explodes on the scene, surely looking like a serious contender for the juvenile. There was that 83 first time out in the restricted maiden for this $40,000 purchase. Now that improves to a 94. Rosario again, this time for Chad Summers, that is. And this is the other kind of good ride you see from Joel. You saw the one, Joel. You saw the one, we talked about the one in the Frizette. This is him on the front end, just pulling out something a little bit extra in the finish as he does. First important question for you. How legit does this figure look?
It looks pretty legit. And the thing is, Rated by Merit won the Discovery earlier. And I think that kind of became the benchmark fig for the day. And so, if anything, maybe that it's 4 points high, 5 points high, something like that. Does an 88 or a 93 make that much of a difference at this stage? Probably in a normal year, no. Maybe with a Ted Noffey a little bit more. But I think what you've got to look at is, this is a really interesting horse for the Breeders' Cup. If for no other reason, then he's going to put a ton of pace into this race, right? And that makes things a lot harder for some of the horses that want to be forward, like Ted Noffey. So he's going to make his presence known in a big way.
Yeah, I haven't seen any pace figures for it. It certainly looked fast. What's your understanding of how would you describe this pace?
Blazing. Okay. It looked like it was very, very fast. And Craig Milkowski has confirmed the timing. It had all the hallmarks of a fast pace, but it had the hallmarks of a fast pace in a race made up of horses that were doing something new distance-wise. Right. And there are fast-paced races that come apart because horses with sustained runs benefit from sitting back and then producing that one run. In a race like this, he took a bunch of horses that are probably sprinters, a couple of whom deeper in the pack are claimers ultimately, and he made them run too fast early. And so that left them with nothing late. Yes. One of the horses that he did it to, I don't think is a horse that'll end up being a claimer, but he did it to It's Our Time. And this was a hugely disappointing effort from It's Our Time, given his debut. I think what we're going to learn ultimately in the long term about It's Our Time is that he beat a bad maiden field. He beat him like a drum, no doubt about it. And I had people kind of scoff at me when I made this comment, but when the second horse is highly regarded and gets a 57 fig, the 17-length margin almost becomes like a workout, right? I mean, he just buried a bunch of bad horses. This was an underwhelming effort. I'm sure the connections are disappointed. The bottom line is they have a nice horse. I'm just going to bet that he's ultimately going to be a sprinter.
We'll see what they decide to do with him. Really fast on the Grillo. Ground support for Beskica and Kelsey Danner. 12-1 winner. Wire-to-wire, 78 figure. Possibly flattered by the pace was my read, but a win is a win. Deep Learning. Can you claim another hard luck story? Fig regressed again. That's twice now, from the 85 to the 78 to the 73. Would you press on to the Breeders' Cup if you were calling the shots with Deep Learning?
No, I'd wait for her 3-year-old season. I think they went to the well a little quickly. Boy, Ricardo Santana Jr. gave her a really, really good ride, too. I mean, she was always in a good spot. She was saving ground. I'd like to know what Kendrick was doing on Miss Picky, who had wired the field in her maiden race, and he decided to make no effort for the early lead. But not coincidentally, that did really work against the horses that were the principals in here, which were Quiet Street, Fildoro, and Deep Learning, who unsurprisingly ran 2-3-4. So it was a race, I think, where great ride by Anna Beskica, left the gate with a plan, did it nicely. A filly that deserves a shot at the Breeders' Cup, if for no other reason than these connections are not going to have a lot of shots at the Breeders' Cup, and they've got a horse that just want to win and you're in. So why the hell not?
Let's talk about some Santa Anita. Wasn't necessarily planning on talking about the Chillingworth, but Tammaro is back. Career best in dominating style, a 95 fig for the familiar faces of Mike Smith and Richard Mandela. How's that 95 for Tammaro going to fit in the filly and mare sprint?
It's going to fit if they put her stablemate Copian in the distaff. Do you think they're going to run these two against each other? I wouldn't bet on it.
But maybe Copian's more apt to run in the distaff now, too.
Correct. I think Copian might be headed for the distaff because I'll tell you, Pete, I mean, Tammaro went into that race with A- workouts on the DRF workout report, which means she's back in form. And I'm not going to fool around with a guy like Mandela when he's got an informed, talented horse. So I think they probably – now, Spendthrift's looking to just dominate this Breeders' Cup. I mean, there's going to be public storage colors draped all over this Breeders' Cup. So it is. They're so loaded. And one of the divisions where they are is this one. So, yeah, I think the 95, given the circumstances, she was coming back from a layoff, so on and so forth. I don't worry too much about it. We know Tammaro on her game is really, really good. And this was the first time she looked this good since the debutante.
We'll talk about the Pharoah. We already kind of did. Jeff Mullins did not get the memo that it was a Baffert team scrimmage, despite the white-haired wonder having 4 in the race. It was the part-time bodybuilder who emerges victorious with Interpedo. I think that's what the horse is called. 8-1 under Berrios. Did I say it right?
Intrepido.
Oh, my God. That's as bad as Alcibiades.
Right.
87.
But not as bad as Alcibiades.
87 fig is not going to scare Ted Noffey. Were there any excuses in behind? And I think we've already addressed. We think now Brandt is probably the leading light for Baffert. But Desert Gate didn't exactly flatter the Futurity form. So it's tricky.
I think what Baffert would probably tell you is that he's got Brandt and then just a few horses. And we don't even really know how good Brandt is, right? I mean, we're assuming Brandt's pretty good, but it's not like he's delivered all that huge. He got a kind of a wildly high fig in a maiden race. This was a race that showed that Ted Noffey is deserving of pretty heavy favoritism. in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, to be perfectly honest.
No hard luck stories from the Baffert flotilla?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I liked Plutarch. I thought he ran really well, but he's a maiden,
Right.
So it's like not like he was some horse with huge glowing credentials.
We got to talk about the Oakleaf, because this now, in light of this division and what we're seeing, Explorer for Baffert and JJ Hernandez in 83 did it well. And given the figures these other horses are running, this is one that's going to catch. Let me take a look. Yeah, I think I said it before, 7-2 at the sharp book, 3-1, pretty much painted 7-2 across the board for Explorer right now. So, not one that I'm going to be excited about betting, but probably not one I'm going to be standing in front of either. Is my 1 foot on the boat, 1 foot on the dock take.
That's fair. Yeah, she doesn't really light my fire. Probably the likeliest horse on the weekend. I mean, not that there'll be a whole lot of candidates, but to run poorly in the Breeders' Cup and win the Hollywood Starlet, it feels pretty likely. I guess I'm probably holding her debutante performance against her. I thought she was brutal in the debutante, but she did run better. She did run better with the courtesy of a kind of a soft trip. But you got to wonder. You got to think of Percy's Bar is probably going to push that a little bit. There's going to be some Frizette horses that want to be forward. So what this division lacks is any kind of stability, right? I mean, the Alcibiades winner is usually a horse with a little bit more credentials. I guess you could argue that Tommy Joe does have them, but didn't really run that much better. You look like a horse like Immersive. Immersive, even though she was never really fast, took a step forward in the Alcibiades, right? And was with Brad Cox. So your thought was she's going to continue to get better. You look at other recent, Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies winners. Just FYI, didn't have 2 fast races prior to the Breeders' Cup. That was a slow Breeders' Cup. Right, that's where the $30 conversation that we're having comes up again, and I think we're onto something there.
We are over time, my friend. Did I forget anything major that we saw? Any horses that we need to talk about, or shall we leave it here?
I think we're good to go, my friend.
All right, good stuff. We will get more in depth. You're referencing wanting to do more trip work, whatever you on a whole bunch more times to talk about a lot of this stuff, but we wanted to get this analysis of as many races as possible out as quickly as possible in more ways than one. Thank you so much, Nick. And thanks to everybody out there for subscribing to the In the Money Media YouTube channel and podcasts.